Good evening and welcome to News 2. Here's what we have for this Tuesday, March 13th edition. National Walkout Day on St. Thomas and St. Croix. The Finance Committee has a hearing and VIA meets with the FCC chairman. This and more in tonight's news. Good evening and thank you for joining us. We're glad to be a part of your evening this evening. We have a great program scheduled for you. We hope you continue to stay tuned in. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
It's been about 1 month since the deadly shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, where 17 people were killed by a gunman wielding an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle. On Wednesday, students and teachers around the nation are planning to walk out of their classrooms to take part in the National School Walkout. #Enough National School Walkout, organized by Empower, the youth branch of the Women's March movement, is considered both a memorial for school shooting victims and a protest for action on gun control. Here in the territory, one school participating will be the Virgin Islands Montessori School and Peter Gruber International Academy and St. Thomas. Students are already working on posters and school officials are behind their students.
It's a national crisis. There have been 23 mass murders at schools over the last 20 years and 300 plus mere shootings. And it's this epidemic, and they just continue to happen, and no one seems to think it's a big issue. And maybe the last shooting was the tipping point, but clearly something's got to be done to change the environments that schools operate under the threat of mass violence.
The Parkland shooting affected the Montessori community. The day after the shooting, students said the campus was in shock. Students like Nalani Figueroa, new students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and the surrounding areas.
I was horrified because I have a friend that actually goes to the school there, and I have another friend that was the school over. And just that personal connection with them, it really horrified me because I was scared for their life. And I don't know what I would do if I lost them. I don't know how she must feel. And it's really scary to think that, this is actually happening.
On Wednesday, students and school leaders are asked to wear orange for solidarity. The walkout is set for 10 a.m. and should last 17 minutes for the 17 students killed in Parkland.
These are people that are no longer with us, and there are so we have plaques made or posters made representing each one of the people that was killed, and we'll have a moment of silence for every one of those people, and I believe a little bio about that person and a photo of them that we walk around so that we can actually try to remember and to put reality behind. We're so into like virtual reality that sometimes I think our kids have a hard time distinguishing. So this is real. This is very, very real.
17 people died.
17 people are dead, and their families are going to mourn their families are changed for the rest of their lives, and these people are gone forever from our world. So we want to make sure that our students appreciate and respect the gravity of this situation.
For News 2, this is James Gardner.
So the walkout is 17 minutes. It starts off with a brief welcome of what our purpose is, a brief moment of silence for the victims that unfortunately died in the Parkland shooting. On a national scale, because the walkout is meant to stand in solidarity with the states, on a national scale we're trying to draw attention to Congress to show them that yes, the Second Amendment needs to be revived. Yes, more actions need to be in place. Not only the states feel this, but also the territories as well. So I think besides sending a message to our local government, we're also sending a message to the national government too, that the territories can stand in solidarity with the states, and that gun violence is a very, very dire issue that needs to be addressed right now.
That our students in the Virgin Islands are participating in the Enough movement tomorrow is significant in that, as the student Diamond Mark stated, it sends a clear message that we are not tolerating the violence that has been taking place in schools around the country. Fortunately, the Virgin Islands has not had one of these instances, but we should be thinking about the proper precautions that we could take to avoid something like this happening in our schools. Safety should be paramount, of course, and this is the opportunity for us to plan wisely and to make sure the property security measures are in place so that something like this does not happen in the Virgin Islands. Tomorrow, 17 minutes of silence will be observed at various schools around the territory. Students are planning on wearing orange or black to join the students at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School in solidarity. And they will also be walking out of class to send a clear message that the gun violence that has happened on school campuses around the country will not be tolerated, is not right, and certainly has more or equal value to the Second Amendment. We'll be back for the next story.
Legislators want to appropriate $500,000 from the St. Croix Capital Improvement Fund to retrofit the William D. Roebuck Industrial Park. The Economic Development Authority Acting Chief Executive Officer Wayne Biggs implored legislators to invest in a microgrid infrastructure at the park to reduce energy costs for tenants and provide alternative energy when main electricity grids are down.
What is microgrid? Microgrid is basically energy generation for a small area. It's called a microgrid because, as you know, energy generation is done on a grid basis, and the microgrid would allow us to provide energy to the park and to other entities that are nearby that are a similar feeder. So if in the event that WAPA goes out, we can provide energy to those entities.
And some of those nearby areas you have identified in your testimony is the Virgin Islands Police Department, the Bureau of Motor Vehicle, perhaps the Bureau of Corrections as well?
That's correct.
Yes, so all of those will be able to obviously benefit from it because you'll have a creation of energy at the microgrid?
Yeah, everybody will be able to benefit. The microgrid will be created, so it's not necessarily an over-creation of energy. There'll be enough energy to power those facilities also.
In terms of having this service, having a microgrid, being able to install and retrofit the industrial park, that is going to make your job of marketing the complex a lot easier.
That it will. And Senator, just to circle back around to your other question, we do have a tenant that's waiting for FEMA to leave to take up that additional 20,000.
That's a good answer. So. No, I like that type of answer.
When we look at alternative methods of producing power in the Virgin Islands, that is certainly a step in the right direction, and microgrids are used around the country. Microgrids are actually small-scale power grids that can operate independently or in conjunction with the area's main electrical grid. And what this does, it enables when there's a power outage to have the continuation of the production of power because the grid on itself can operate independently of the major power source that the electricity is coming from. A lot of cities have implemented this. It also has caused a cost saving for electricity production around the country, and it's good that we're talking about this for our tech park in St. Croix. I think that this can be expounded a bit further for the rest of the communities to include our schools, hospitals, and other government businesses and agencies that are of significance to the community. We have a story coming up on a FCC visit from their chairman to VIO.
Seeing firsthand the difficulties with restoring communications in the Virgin Islands, FCC Chair Ajit Pai with the FCC Hurricane Recovery Task Force and FEMA representatives met with VIA executives on Saturday, March 10, 2018, to understand the challenges the largest telecommunications network has in reestablishing full service to residents. FCC Chair Pai toured the facilities of the VIA network on the island of St. Thomas. At the VIA Networks Operations Center, FCC and FEMA were given detailed analysis of the hurricane-damaged VIA network and the status of restoration. News 2 commentator Leslie Comisiong interviewed the FCC chair for his insights now being in the Virgin Islands.
Two main things I've drawn already. Number one is that there are some substantial challenges here in the islands, given the geographic nature of some of the damage that happened. And I think the second thing I've drawn is that the people of the Virgin Islands are incredibly resilient. I've visited visited now a 911 call center, talked to a number of communications providers, met with some members of the Public Service Commission, and what comes out to me is the fact that everyone wants to come together to improve the situation.
Very happy to hear that the FCC has a plan, the USVI Connect plan, $204 million to help with the rebuilding of our communication systems broadband. How was that amount determined, and who are the players that gets to decide how that money will be spent in the territory?
We determined that amount based on how much we had available for the U.S. Virgin Islands and trying to create more resources for companies in the Virgin Islands to use. We will be deciding how that money is allocated based on proposals that are submitted by various companies, both fixed broadband companies and mobile companies. We want to make sure we have a short-term infusion of money to make sure that these networks are up and running as quickly as possible, but we recognize that it's also a long-term proposition, and so we are allocating approximately $191 million specifically for the Virgin Islands over the next decade for fixed broadband and over the next 3 years for mobile broadband. We want to make sure the networks aren't just where they were before, but are even better than ever, so that people can enjoy the communications services that they've increasingly come to rely on.
Nearing the end of the meeting with VIA, the FCC Hurricane Recovery Task Force met with VIA's field crew to observe some of the on-the-ground restoration work, from removing damaged lines to the installation of new service lines.
The reliability of communications in the Virgin Islands is super important. As you know, after the storms, communications became our lifeline, both to each other here in the Virgin Islands and to the outside world. And how strong our communication networks are will determine our ability to get back up on our feet and how quickly we do that after an actual disaster. The fact that the FCC chairman has visited the Virgin Islands is really, really a big deal. He has had the opportunity now to see firsthand exactly what we have gone through, and the level of support, the $204 million that is part of the USVI Connect program that is dedicated to rebuilding our communications infrastructure, specifically our broadband, etc., is great support and the exact type of support that we need to rebuild the structures, the communication infrastructure, stronger and better than before. We were pleased to have this visit, happy to have him visit VIA facilities, as we are one of the largest communications providers in the territory, and we look forward to rebuilding bigger and better. We have weather coming up next. Stay tuned.
Well, we have high pressure to the north and high pressure to the south, and that is leading to some pretty quiet conditions here across the Caribbean. In fact, it is so dry that we're not seeing anything really, even as far as those trade wind showers. It is extremely isolated, any activity that we're going to be getting here. For tonight, we just have mainly clear skies. It'll be a humid one with an overnight low of 74 degrees. And in St. John tomorrow, mostly sunny, humid, 82 degrees. Heading into St. Thomas, also a mostly sunny sky in the forecast, humid conditions, 82 degrees there. Even warmer in St. Croix, where we top out at 86 degrees. It'll be a little bit breezy there in St. Croix with a mostly sunny sky. The marine forecast on the Atlantic side, waves are 3 to 5 feet. We have a southeasterly wind, 10 to 15 knots, and on the Caribbean side as well, 3 to 5 feet are our waves. We have a southeasterly wind of 10 to 15 knots. Looking at the extended outlook here, not much to talk about because we have just mostly sunny skies continuing for your Thursday, 82 degrees for our daytime high. Friday, pretty much the same, a carbon copy. We have mostly sunny skies and nice, 82 on Saturday as well. Now, Sunday is our next best chance where we could perhaps see a shower in places. Otherwise, we have a mixture of clouds and sun. Back to you.
It is a privilege on behalf of the 32nd Legislature to recognize several Virgin Islanders for their outstanding contributions in athletic, education, youth services, broadcasting, and reggae music at this Perma Plaque ceremony at the Capitol Building. The Virgin Islands Olympic Committee, Leona Wheatley, Scott Bradley, Irvin Brownlee Brown, and Delano Pressure Brown have all made a mark on our community by serving as ambassadors, nurturing our children, creating opportunities for the disadvantaged, enriching our collective memory, and spreading the beauty of the Virgin Islands across our shores. The people of the Virgin Islands honor you, as well as members of your family are present to witness that you are recognized within your community for your significant contribution. Also, for the members of the 31st legislature, we extend their congratulations as well, and Senator Harrigan is a member of the 31st legislature. So God bless you, and may you have continued good health and long years. Broadcasting skills at WSDA and bringing character Walter and others to be part of our homes as well as our lives. We give you a grateful thank you and God's best blessings and continued good health. Congratulations.
Today's honorees at the 32nd Legislature included the Virgin Islands Olympic Committee, Miss Leona B. Wheatley, Mr. Scott Bradley, Mr. Irvin Brownie Brown, and his son, Mr. Delano Pressure Brown. Of course, it's always important for a community to recognize individuals that have made outstanding contributions, and each of these individuals have done so, and the Olympic Committee, of course, in its own right. We thank them for all they've contributed, and we wish them a very happy and successful future. We also have some other interesting updates for you this evening. The Virgin Islands Veterans Administration will be honoring women this month in 2 ceremonies on both islands. The first will take place at the Leonard Francis Armory on the 13th of March from 6 to 8 o'clock, and the second will be at the American Legion Post 85 on St. Croix on the 14th from 6 to 8. Also, this month, the CFVI, the Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands, has awards for their STEM grants and educators recipients. The Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands is awarding $31,500 in grants to support a variety of STEM programs and projects within the Virgin Islands public schools and early childhood centers in the USVI. For the 3rd year in a row, these grants were made possible by a generous donation and contribution from the AT&T Foundation. If you are interested in applying for one of these grants, you can contact the Virgin Islands Community Foundation at 340-774-6031. That's 340-774-6031. And we have some updates on the car ferry on St. John. The Virgin Islands Port Authority has received notice from the Love City Car Ferries, Inc. that effective March 15th, it will no longer accept tickets from Global Marine LLC. Travelers will therefore be required to purchase tickets directly from Love City Car Ferries to travel on any Love City Car Ferries going to St. Croix and St. Thomas. So if you have those old tickets, you might want to redeem them right away, because as of the 15th, they will no longer be accepted by Love City Car Ferry for those of you that have to traverse between the both islands. And we have some great news. The largest cruise ship in the world, the Symphony of the Seas, will be making port calls to the territory a bit later on this year, and we are making the adequate preparations at our ports to accommodate this phenomenal ship. Of course, Charlotte Amalia has been host to many of the largest cruise ships in the world on a regular basis. We seem to do what we have to do to get prepared to have these large ships make calls on the port of Charlotte Amalia, and I am confident that we will be able to be ready to accommodate the Symphony of the Seas later this year when it makes a visit to the territory. That's it for our program this evening. We thank you for joining us. I'm Leslie Kamisiang. Have a great Virgin Islands evening. We'll see you later.